You're watching TVC Breakfast. The Nigerian Labour Congress has given President Muhammadu Buhari until May 1 to sign the new minimum wage bill.
President of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Ayuba Waba, gave the ultimatum on Saturday in Abuja. The lower and upper chambers of the National Assembly had earlier in the year passed the 30,000 naira minimum wage bill as against the 27,000 naira recommendation of the Council of States.
The bill has been awaiting presidential assent all the while, and we expect that in the coming days the president will sign it into law. Joining me now is an HR expert and fellow of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management, Femi Mokikon. Femi, good morning. It's good to have you join me right now.
Good morning. Thank you
now,
for having me.
We saw the president align himself to the 30,000 naira minimum wage, and then it was passed by the Senate, and now awaiting assent of the president. But we expect, Nigerians expect, that the president would have been a little the approach to which he would have signed the assent would have been quicker.
Yeah, I think we need to understand the way it works.
Okay.
All of us keep hearing the 30,000, 30,000. An act is a document that has several clauses. I have no idea how many clauses are in this particular act. If the president is going to sign any act or any bill into an act, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to understand what is in each of the clauses, because they all have implications. And I suspect that as the president, he's not the one who is just going to read through from section 1 to whatever number the sections are. He has individuals who are specialists.
As a team.
Those guys are going to go through every bit of it. If there are comments to be made that are not consistent with, don't forget that this bill emanated from them. If they are not consistent with what is sent to the assembly, they will need to rationalize. Why is there this change? And so they will take each of those clauses and they will look at, and then at the end of it, if it's something that should go, they give it to him for him to assent.
The labor union has given the president May the 1st to, as an ultimatum or deadline to sign or put his assent to the bill. What implication will this have?
Well, the implication is for him to sign or not to sign. If he signs, no issues. And I suspect what the president wants to do, again I'm second guessing, is to use it as a May-Day gift for the workers. I have a feeling that he will sign that bill. Don't forget that the bill he sent to the assembly was 27,000. The assembly came up with 30,000. I'm sure somewhere in between, they are still struggling to confirm, yes, is it okay? Is it not okay? We gave them 27,000. Why are they giving us 30,000? And if at the end of the day he wants to agree with the 30,000, he needs to be able to convince himself. And also, of course, you know, it has implications for cost, both for the federal, for the states, local government, and even the private sector. It has implications
now,
for the months.
Talking about the cost implication now, we also recall that the 2019 budget did not make provision for the minimum wage.
Yes.
What's the way forward on that?
I think that's why the president himself set up a committee under Rewane and asked, okay, since we didn't make provision for this, you go around and see how we will be able to fund whatever financial implications this has for going forward. That is looking at one side of it, which is the government side, particularly federal. What happens to the state? We are not aware that any state has set up any committee to go and figure out how they make this money available. What happens to the private sector? Of course, I know that in the private sector, which is where I belong, particularly the organized private sector, hardly will you see any organization today where they are paying less than 30,000 naira. And if there are, don't forget, this minimum wage is not a general salary increase. It's to say that this is the minimum that anybody who is a worker will earn. So if you have 50 employees and 30 of them are already above minimum wage, what we're talking about is what do you do with the remaining 20? So I'm sure they too will be interested in...
Yeah, because by implication, there's going to be a jack-up of salaries across the board, one way or the other, isn't it?
I don't, for practical purposes, it's usually not across board.
Okay.
Yes, those with the minimum wage will get they get jacked up to that minimum. And then there's what we call the consequential adjustments. For instance, if the parity was like 15,000 naira before minimum wage, and you suddenly increase somebody from 15 to 30, what happens to the man who was on 30 before? The guy who was on 35, the guy who was on 40? Relativity. Exactly. So there will be some incremental adjustment, but it doesn't mean that everybody will get the same quantum or the same percentage increase. You will get to a point where as you go higher, you get zero increase. And you cannot complain. All right.
Wait, like you said, let us second guess that it's possible the president wants to give workers the May Day gift. But let us look at it from the other perspective. If the president doesn't sign it into law, what could likely happen?
Well, if he doesn't sign it, I think there must be some explanation.
Okay.
He will give reasons why. I'm sure you are aware several bills have been returned to the National Assembly. Okay. If he doesn't sign, what will then happen is it will follow that pattern. All right. He will return it to the National Assembly.
At least workers will understand.
And then he will say, for these reasons.
Yes.
And I can give you an example. Pensions Reform Act, for instance. There's just one clause there. It says minimum 10% employer, 8% employee, which total 18. But the next clause says that if the employer wants to pay, the employer should pay 20%. Right. If you add 10 plus 18 and plus 8, what does it give you? It gives you 18. So that kind of review, editing, corrections, it shouldn't be in any of the acts.
All right. Femi Mokikon, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.